All right, everybody. Hello and welcome back to the final stream of the round of 32 weekend for the Osu Mania 7 Key World Cup 2026. We've gotten all 16 of our round of 32 matchups done, and we have our round of 16 matchups ready to go on the bracket. We just have one last thing to go through for this weekend. And that's going to be the map pool that all these wonderful teams are going to be facing off against each other with for next weekend. So that will be our round of 16 pool, commentated by myself, Toph Daddy, and joined here by one of our map selectors, Tails DK. How's it going?
Hello everyone, we had some really exciting matches this week, and this map pool we're about to show is going to be pretty spicy, I think. So, really excited to see how teams will do on this.
I mean, I've already thought that the round of 32 pool was spicier than expected. So seeing the round of 16 pool definitely got me very excited. I'm really interested to see how all of these teams in the round of 16 are going to be able to do, especially down in that losers bracket where they're fighting for their tournament lives. So it's going to make for an exciting weekend, but I don't think there's too much else to mention unless you have anything else before we start getting into the actual map pool.
No, I think we can just jump right into it.
Absolutely. And
we will be starting with our speed pair. This is Reach for Victory, or Reach for Your Victory by a map by Takjun. This is gonna be 256 BPM. It's gonna be a little bit more simple snaps than last week, where we had a bunch of different snaps all the time. This is gonna be more consistent snap-wise, and it's gonna be a little bit easier to read, so not too many tricky spots.
You can already see kind of in this intro that a lot of the stream patterns are connected, I suppose, if you want to say that, where it's more like 2, 3, 4 and 1, 2, 3s instead of being more like sporadic with the patterning types, despite being, 34 BPM higher than last week's speed pick.
Yeah. We do note that some of these bursts are a little bit awkward actually to probably hit. But outside of that, this is gonna be a pretty simple speed pick for this round at least.
Yeah, the interesting thing that I always note about these early round speed picks is that they almost play like a second speed chord stream pick in a certain sense, where you have a lot of those like very, very light chord stream patterns with the doubles and a couple of triples strewn throughout, so you can almost play it in the same way. It's just a lot faster than the speed chord string pick is going to be.
Yeah. We do see it, there's like a bit of downtime in between as well, so it's not gonna be a full-on stream all the way through. Players do get a bit of a break.
Well, they think they get a break until that dense section comes along to just kind of mess with them. As we get to this ending section, we start seeing a few more anchory or like implied mini jags in some of the patterns, which isn't really going to impact the speed section specifically, but does add a little bit of complexity to the slower patterns around them and can be kind of a motion shifter for their hands, especially as you start to transition back into a little bit more complicated speed patterns in this ending.
Yeah. See here, it just keeps going until the very end. Isn't quite lit up here at the ending? When you think it's over, it keeps going.
The classic experience, or quad A. I don't know how they want it to be pronounced, but it's your classics. It's 256 BPM. It's really fast, but I think it's going to be pretty comfortable.
Yeah.
That's going to move us right into our Rise 2, and this is going to be our dense chord stream pick. And this is, at least in my opinion, quite a step up from the round of 32. This one's going to be at 160 BPM. It's Momone Chinoi's Deno Mienyen Bao. a map by X Neko, and this map has some similarities. It's extremely dense. I think more dense even than our pick from round of 32. Increases that BPM just a little bit, looks like by about 20 BPM, since I think it was 141 in round of 32. And the other part of it too is that the density stays pretty consistent throughout the entire map, so you don't really get too many slowdown sections. There's one in the second half where the density really decreases and you get a little bit of a breather, but for the most part, this hits you with this high density for the whole map.
Yeah, it's really gonna be quite taxing on stamina because it does have these kind of stop and go motions where there's just like small breaks, but like they're not really long enough to like really be like actual proper breaks, and so they're just kind of actually pretty taxing on stamina.
Yeah, it's the broken chord stream structure that kind of forces you to move your hands in. It changes your hand motion from going from acting chord stream to acting like chord jack type patterns, and that can be really difficult to maintain your stamina on, especially with, as like I mentioned, as constant as the structure is on this, and it being a little bit longer than last week's as well.
Yeah. Here's the one break that you really get.
And then it just starts back up a little lighter than we saw in the earlier sections of the chart, but that will not be here for very long.
Yeah, this is also quite bracket-ish heavy. It's not like full bracket, but they are kind of hidden in here. Not as bracket heavy as last week, which was full-on brackets, mostly.
Yeah, so that bracket type structure is only gonna serve to make it even more stamina draining. Require a lot more of that finger independence that maybe last week's chord string pick or dense chord string pick didn't necessarily require, especially being notably faster than last week's.
Yeah. With that, we can move on to our fast chord stream pick, and this is gonna be 69 the 74 RT. Gonna be slightly sped up to 189 BPM. This is gonna be have a little bit more variety than last week in the patterns, where last week was pretty comfortable, just rolls back and forth. We're gonna have some brackets in here and some denser patterns as well, but not quite as dense as the dense chord stream pick whatsoever. It does also have plenty of breaks, so stamina is not gonna be too taxing on this one.
Yeah, I think the other side of it too is that this is only OD8. The dense chord stream pick that we had, that we just showed, was OD 8.5, something that probably is worth mentioning, because that means that if you want to get good accuracy on that dense chord stream pick, you're going to have to strain yourself a little bit more than usual to get good ratio. This one doesn't quite have that taxing element, and you can play it a little bit normally, or at least less intensely, to get that solid ratio, especially with how less dense it is and less stamina draining in general that the map is.
Yeah, we do see here another break before the map really starts picking up again. But yeah, there is some density mixed in some of these bursts, but like they're very, very short parts, so they're not like too bad to deal with. And here we see some of these like small bracket pylons come in here and there.
Yeah, nothing too major. It looks like mostly double staircases in a sense when it gets to its densest portion, or at least the main period of it. And then you get like these transitions at the end that get a little denser, but nothing that I think these players are going to have too many issues with. Definitely on the lighter side, and I think it's going to be very comfortable for anyone who's good at the rice side of things. But that's going to move us on to our rice floor pick, our chord jack selection. And that's going to be K4Y5's Soyo Soyo, a map by PWHK. And chord jacks are chord jacks. There's not... there's not a huge BPM increase this week. I think last week's was about 106, 107, something like that. So it's less than a 10 BPM increase. However, you should already be able to tell that the structure of this is not only more complex, but also has a bigger focus on long jacks, especially in this opening. So that's going to cause a lot bigger issues with keeping strong on your coordination and your ability to get good accuracy on these core jacks than what we saw from round of 32's core jack day.
Yeah, this first half is gonna be quite control heavy. You're gonna see these big long jacks here, and it does have a little break section in the middle, so at least you get a little break after going through all of those super long jacks. But the second half is gonna be a bit more normal.
Normal in quotation marks.
In quotations. It's not gonna include as many of these long jacks at all. It's gonna be more density focused, more dense chord jack style. But the first half is really gonna be a test of some of the lower seeded teams, I think. Whereas it's not gonna be as safe of a pick as last week's, which was way more comfortable.
Yeah, I think the other side of that too is that this map is a lot more constant, where round of 32's core jack pick had a lot of breaks between the core jack patterns, and you got to take your hands off the keyboard a bunch and go back in and out. This one basically doesn't do that. You're just continuing to core jack the entire time, and I think that can make it a little bit more taxing in that sense.
Yeah. But moving on to our tech accuracy pick, this is gonna be Amama Tuetsu Bonbon featuring Kasane Eto and Sundamon by Cola. And this is another PWHK map. This is gonna be far and away the least physically demanding rice pick of the pool, but it's gonna be really hard to accuracy.
Yeah, it's gonna have
just all these snaps all the way throughout that are just gonna be race-like notes, but not quite.
Yeah, it has actually quite a similar structure to last week's, but instead of the grace notes being far apart and being more of 12th rhythm type things, these are pure grace notes and require you to be very focused on getting good accuracy if you want to score well on this.
Yeah, I can imagine some teams would want to bang those just because maybe not too consistent on it.
It's definitely one of those maps that's I think it's going to be one of those maps that has close margins, not because of the same reason that something like Rice 4 would, but because of the idea that most people aren't going to be super consistent on holding combos on something like this, especially with some of those tough implied mini jack patterns in the middle of all of the graces. This is not the easiest to keep combo on, despite not being super physically demanding in general.
Yeah. These sections are deceptively hard to accuracy.
Tends to be the case for these kinds of maps, I think.
Yeah. Here we go. A bit more density here towards the ending.
Yeah, you get kind of streamy type things, but they're largely the large difficulty portion of this ending is not really going to be the density. I don't think people are going to have problems reading through it. I think it's more so going to be the trying to keep accuracy with all the polyrhythms that are happening within those stream sections.
Yeah. It's definitely gonna be quite a tricky map.
Absolutely, but that is going to finish off our base rice pool for now. We'll be moving on to our long notes, and as expected, we're going to be getting our release pick out of the way first for LN1. Dianella Marilag, a collab map between a lot of people, actually. We've got Maple Syrup, Kurisu Makise, Surf Chew 85, Kalpaka, and X Neko. So a big collab here for this release pick, but in my opinion, it's my favorite long note pick, but that's because I'm not I'm not really capable of playing the other ones as well. But this one's going to be the least physically demanding and definitely not as coordination heavy as what we'll be seeing later. But it is still tricky nonetheless to get good accuracy on these releases, especially with how staggered so many of them are. You can see, like in round of 32, the release pick were mostly on the beats. You could kind of get them, but they were still difficult to release. This one is not quite like that at all, where all of the LNs tend to have a lot of staggered releases, and you have to be very cognizant of that.
Yeah, something to notice that some of these really short long notes that come in between are also pretty hard to get proper accuracy on. Because they're like in between where you just click them as hit them as a rise note, but they're also like a bit longer, so you need to hold on to them a tiny bit. And so
the staccato type LMs that require you to pay attention to them, but it almost feels natural until it's not, and you start getting 200s on them for some reason.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna be quite tricky to get a really good accuracy on this one.
Definitely is. That OD is quite low, 5.8, even lower than the Rice or the LN1 from round of 32. But I don't think that's going to take away from the difficulty of this in general. Obviously, accuracy is going to be a big deal when you're talking about a release pick, but you can't understate the coordination that is required when you're trying to release things at the right time. I expect a lot of misses on a map like this, just like we were seeing in round of 32.
Yeah. And we do see here the outro is a little bit easier. There's not too much release here going on. A little bit more simple. But that is gonna do for our LN release pick. And with that, it's our LN coordination pick. And this is gonna be Jin Li Xiao by Yinlin and Yun Shiki, a map by X Neko again. And following the trend of last week, we have a Chinese song for our long note coordination pick. And this one is gonna step up quite a bit, I wanna say, in the density. It's gonna be slightly less long note, like long notes. But there's still gonna be plenty of them.
Yeah, this is when the density of these coordination picks gets this dense. I start to wonder how anyone even handles this kind of thing. It gets so confusing so quickly. And I know these players are capable of it, but this just brings up the coordination requirement to another level from last week.
Yeah. There are these rise notes in between which can really throw you off. They're placed pretty awkwardly to try and make you miss on some of these long notes that you're holding down.
Yeah, and the other side of it too is that, like, I know that I already mentioned in the release pick that there's still quite a bit of coordination required. This is the coordination pick. There's still quite a bit of release requirement in this. There's some staggering, even if they're on the 1/4 beats. It still requires you to have control over your releases and make sure that you're solid on those, despite primarily being about the finger independence and coordination aspect that these LNs have, especially when it gets as dense as we're seeing there, where you're just swapping in and out of 5-note LN holds that just last so long.
Yeah, I think this map is gonna be quite tricky for teams that had trouble with it this week. It's just gonna continue being kind of hard. But yeah.
Yeah, that's going to do it for our coordination pick. We got our third and final regular long note pick anyways, and this one's going to be our density pick. DJ Taka featuring I Me, True Blue, a well-known song, I think, in the community in general. This one's going to be 164 BPM, and this one, by far the densest of the long note picks. and has quite a much heavier physical requirement, but doesn't need too much of a focus on the releases quite as much as you just need to be able to read through these types of patterns.
Yeah, I will say that compared to last week, it is a little bit less comfortable. Last week's was really, really comfortable, the LN density. This one's gonna have some of these overlapping LNs a little bit more. And that's gonna probably be something that will throw some teams that thought that last week's was like not too difficult. But it's not gonna be too much of a difference in like the raw like release and coordination skill. It's mostly gonna be focused on these super dense streams and reading.
That's kind of what I would expect. There definitely are harder patterns. In particular, I don't think it's as connected, so to speak. So things are more difficult to kind of read through. Maybe that's just me as someone who's not great at this kind of stuff. But it definitely is harder to read and coordinate, especially with the separation of your fingers on different hands. Especially in a section like this, where you can see the extended long nodes really don't share hands at singular times. Especially when it gets super dense, and that can be difficult to handle.
Yeah. At the end, there's a long space bar. Long note.
Love the long space bar. It's a classic.
But that is it for our regular long note picks. We're gonna move into our generic hybrid. This is gonna be Etoriz, a song by Shigure Ikui, mapped by Vivid Cycle. And this one is gonna be quite dense compared to last week. I think last week's was kinda not too dense. It was kinda common that way. But there's gonna be quite a bit of density in this one. And it does have like a few tricky bursts throughout. Like this one here, you can see like these long note patterns are quite tricky to hit. But other than that, it's gonna be mostly pretty comfortable for most teams, I think.
Yeah, this definitely is gonna play like probably the most straightforward of the hybrid picks. It kind of swaps between density LN patterning and then like regular chord stream with a couple of bursts, like for the rice patterns in general. So it's going to play pretty comfortably, I think, for most players. It's one of those picks where I would expect a rice focused team, if they were like out of rice picks to go for in the pool, this is something that they would fall back on as a potential selection if they needed something, because it's very comfortable on both the rice side and the long note side, and it's not too hard to transition in and out of either section.
Yeah, we do see here again these like tricky LN sections coming in here. Going into the last chorus here, we're gonna have more of these long note patterns coming in. So yeah, this is just gonna keep going, really. It's not gonna be there's gonna be a little bit of a density buff here right at the end, as you can see, but it's not gonna be too crazy. They're pretty comfortable.
Yeah, nothing too bad. Nothing people can't handle, at least in this round. I expect the biggest difficulty of this, especially with this ending, is the fact that it kind of mixes those rice and long note patterns, whereas at the beginning of the chart, or at least the first couple quarters, it was a long note density section followed by a rice section, and then back to a rice section, and kind of swaps back and forth, whereas that ending kind of mixes the two and makes it a little more difficult in that sense.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's going to do it for Hybrid 1. We've got our second hybrid pick, another well-known song, I think. Bibuko's Reizoko Mitara Puden Ganai, a map by Yi. And this one is going to be a little bit more rice-focused than the other two. You can already tell that we see a little bit more bursty patterns, a little bit more dense rice patterns in general that just has some LN patterns mixed throughout to kind of mess with you. You see those much lighter LN patterns than what we saw in Hybrid 1. So The big deal with this is going to make sure that you're able to do the less intrusive element patterns while still holding on to the physical requirements of the rice.
Yeah. Also, sorry for putting this song in your guys' head next week.
Yeah, see, I've listened to this so many times on while playing OSU Standard, just because for some reason I have this on Standard, or like one of my old 7-key packs, and I was already annoyed downloading this and having it on my game again. So have fun with that, teams playing in the 7-key World Cup.
Yeah. You see here, big stream sections. And now we go into a more mixed section a little bit, where these, I mean, the long notes are not going to be too intrusive, but they are going to be quite tricky with all of the density that is going on the rice.
Yeah, absolutely. It plays more like you're only holding down 1 or 2 long notes at a time while having some rice patterns around it, which can be tricky to coordinate, especially if you're not used to it, but the bigger difficulty is going to come when those denser rice patterns come around afterwards. And I think that we just saw arguably the hardest part, where that density really picks it up. And that ending going to have a couple of tricky bursts, but nothing too bad. But that will finish off our second hybrid pick.
Yeah, and moving on to our technical hybrid, we have Sapphire on Fire by Niwashi, a map by Rockma. We're gonna see this map being is in the name, the technical hybrid. It's gonna be quite tricky. It's gonna have a lot of different snaps throughout. The patterns themselves are not too dense, so that way it's not like the hardest physicality, but we will see that the map in general is gonna be quite tricky to get good act on, and misses will probably come also with all these mini jacks involved.
Yeah, Rockma, honestly, I didn't pay attention that much when I was playing through these earlier. Rockma's a name I did not expect to see coming out in this map pool, but they are throwing their hat in the ring with a very shield-heavy hybrid here. You can already tell there's a lot of mini jacks and a lot of shields that are definitely going to be tricky to keep yourself consistent on. That technical aspect would be very difficult to hold on to.
Yeah, see some of these like fast bursts here. Then we have a bit of a small right section before going into a pretty tricky long note section, where you have to like hold down these kind of long notes while also doing some shorter ones in between, and they're kind of spaced out apart, so in that way it's gonna be quite tricky to keep holding on to them all.
Yeah, we get a little bit of a lighter section here. Some of those long notes do come back, but this should be a little bit of a breather section. Despite the kind of difficult rhythms to get used to there, it should still be much lighter than the rest of it and give you a chance to kind of get yourself back as we get into the ending section of this, where that technicality starts to come back. You see a lot of mini jacks coming around, and those rice patterns are not messing around. Not so heavy on the shields, but that does not mean you can get away with not paying attention to the long note patterns.
Yeah.
And that's going to finish it off for our hybrid pool. We just have one set of maps left before our tiebreaker, and that's going to be our extreme maps, the new addition here to at least the early rounds. And we do have a bit of a video here, but we'll be still commentating over that, and I'll say what this is. EX1 is going to be Emo Cosine's Love Pills. This is going to be a map by GS Hina and Kobe, and as expected from an EX1 pick, this is going to be our mixed rice and highest physicality requirement pick in for as far as like rice goes anyways. And this gets really dense. You'll be seeing a lot of dense chord streams with a lot of technical patterns strewn between it. It's just very complex.
Yeah, we do also have a pretty funny conversation going on in the background for this one.
Yeah.
This is a storyboard by Choco Milku, who's been kind enough to make us this. And we do see, yeah, this map is just gonna be quite tricky. We have these like fast dump style patterns here and there, mixed in with a bunch of mini jacks throughout, and it's just gonna be pretty high density throughout. So it's players. Last week's was a little bit more chill. This week we're really gonna be stepping it up on the EX1 pick there.
Yeah, I made a note from last week's EX1 that it wasn't that much more difficult than the rest of the Rice pool. This one, not the case. This one is notably more difficult than every Rice pick outside of this one. So there's definitely going to be... I could definitely see this being a very popular pick for the higher seeded teams that want to push that physical requirement and make sure that they have their advantage on it as they can see it.
So yeah, we do have a little bit of a break in the middle, so not too much of a break because it is still quite dense, all things considered. A lot of stuff going on, but we do go into the second half here. This is one of our longer picks in the pool this week as well, being at 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah, so that length is actually going to... That's going to supply a little bit of a stamina difficulty on top of the already high physicality required. So it's almost like there's a couple of maps in this pool where that stamina is really going to start being tested. And I know all these players are capable of that, but this is where the keeping your accuracy as high as possible is going to start getting a lot more difficult in comparison to what we saw from round of 32.
Yeah, see here at the end it just doesn't really stop, it just keeps going.
Yeah, this is just going to be insane to watch, because I can imagine, especially like right at that ending, you see like the patterning is starting to slow down, but right at the end of that Kiai-ish section, there were a couple of triple jacks to end it off, and I could imagine that people's stamina is not necessarily ready for something like that after over 3 minutes of some really dense and difficult technical and just general Rice patterns. So I could see some chokes happening there, and this is going to be a really interesting pick to see how people are able to hold on throughout it.
Yeah, gonna be quite interesting to see how people are gonna do. But that is it for EX1 pick. We're gonna move over to our EX2, which is our Ellen mixed pick, and this is gonna be World Execute Me by Millie, a map by Kurisi Makiza and Yi. This is gonna be just really hard all the way throughout, honestly.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a little bit less coordination heavy than last week's, as in like just fully focused on that. It's gonna have more of that density involved into it throughout, but it still does have kind of a bit of everything.
Yeah, the thing that I'll say about this is that like it definitely does try to do what it needs to balance out the coordination aspects and the density aspects. That said, it's 130 BPM. It's a little bit on the slow side, which means even the density sections are going to be a little bit awkward. And you can already see that kind of coming out where those gaps between the notes in the more dense sections are not necessarily the easiest to handle. And the slowness means you need to be paying a lot of attention to your releases on this. This is a brutal long note chart through and through.
Yeah, you see it gets really dense on the chorus, as we can see, with these big rolls, but they are quite slow. So it's like not gonna be too much like difficulty on like maybe the physicality. It's gonna be more on the reading density side.
Yeah, absolutely. We do get a little bit of a slower section here where there's not too much density, not too much coordination required, but we're only halfway through it, and that transitions right into another very dense section with some awkward releases and some shields at that 130 BPM. The shields aren't too fast, so the mini jack actually physicality won't be too bad, but that doesn't mean it won't be hard to hold on to the long notes through those shields.
Yeah. You can see it just doesn't really like let up with the difficulty throughout. It's like, for the most part, it's just gonna keep being hard. This is probably one of the more comfortable sections that we have there. Maybe you can use it as a little break, where the long notes are not too long.
Maybe you can. I can't.
Yeah.
But maybe you can. There's also some pretty important to note, like some brackety LN patterns in this section. So even though it's not like so difficult on the LN side, you still do have to pay attention to the coordination and the finger independence required for those more bracket heavy LN patterns.
Yeah, getting into the chords, we have more of what we saw in the first chorus, where the big long note stairs comes back. A little bit smaller releases at the end. It's release gap. It's gonna be pretty tricky overall for some of the players, I think, especially in the losers bracket.
Yeah, I think that's another case where, like, in round of 32's EX2 was not like a crazy jump up in difficulty compared to the LN pool in general. This one is a huge step up from the LN maps that we have in the LN pool for round of 16. It is really, really difficult. But with that being the case, we've just got one more map in the EX pool before our tiebreaker, and that's going to be our more hybrid-focused EX pick, and that's Akiri's Symphony of the Frozen Cacophony, a map by Blocko. And this one is arguably the hardest map overall in the pool. I can't necessarily guarantee that, but it certainly feels that way.
I think outside of the tiebreaker, this is the most physically demanding one, for sure. But unlike last week, it does have a little bit more breaks in between, so it's not gonna be as constant as Sepia was last week, where it was a real stamina challenge in that way. We do have a pretty nice intro here before it really gets into the density part.
Yeah, the intro is not too difficult. I think there's a couple of traps in it where those long notes with the burst can be a little bit difficult, but nothing that's... It's not where the main difficulty is. We already see some 160 BPM quick, like, dense jack patterns in this transition, and it's only going to get even more difficult as this starts to go, and we see much more technical patterns coming out in this main section.
Yeah, here with the kind of a mixed rice section with these jacks in between the streams, and this part here is really tricky, these patterns. Very hard to kind of get your head around these ones. They're like trills, but very uncomfortable to properly hit. And then it goes into more of a hybrid section, where we have these rice patterns mixed in between these long notes again.
Now, important to note about this is that we have this really dense section here with the long notes and the very hybridy, just general structure, but we do get a quite nice break here. So the stamina, despite it being almost 4 minutes long, the stamina is not going to be as destructive on accuracy or combo as it would be on some of the other picks we have in the pool that are more constant and don't have these breaks.
Yeah, and we're gonna get right back into it though.
Right back into it, but any break is better than none, which some of the maps in the pool don't have any breaks. So very very, very appreciated, I think.
Here we go, the ending. We're gonna have this big chord stream here, starting off the section. And then we will have it transition here into a little bit of hybrid with this one long note coming in between. It's gonna be a little bit tricky, just adding a little bit of into the section before it really goes in and becomes this big long note section here towards the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you say that, you were kind of saying that one long note thing is a little bit of a joke, but that can mean a lot. Though, compared to the density that we're seeing in this section, that is going to be almost nothing, but you still do have to pay attention. One way or another, an absolutely brutal chart with a very high combo count. So comboing it specifically is not going to necessarily impact your score that much. I think this is going to be a big accuracy tester, though. If you miss too much, which is very possible on a map like this, it's going to be devastating.
Yeah. But that is gonna bring us to our tiebreaker, and it's going to be Time to Beat the Odds extended version by Kagetora. This is a map by Akasha and Mochineko, a collab with a storyboard by Initial D and graphics designed by Tetsurain. This one is gonna be not as mixed patterns. We're gonna see big right sections and big long note sections, but they're gonna be quite separated throughout. Unlike some of the other hybrid maps we've seen earlier in Mappool.
Yeah, something fun to note. This does break the 7-star barrier already for the difficulty of the pools. So round of 16 already getting quite up there, but I think you can already tell why this is getting such a high star rating. We're getting some really dense LN patterns at that 160 BPM, and it's just kind of swapping in and out of some dense LN sections, and we already saw some really difficult, more technical rice sections at the beginning, and we're only a quarter of the way through, and we're still seeing some really insanely dense sections that right now are just swapping between that dense LN and those really mini jack heavy and shield heavy patterns.
Yeah, I think this song is like gonna be really fun for players to play though. This song is gonna be very fun to practice.
I think what's really interesting is that, like, with the separation of the LN and the rise sections means that a certain type of player, I think, is going to be particularly strong at maps like this, where some hybrid players you would expect to be good when it comes to mixing the patterns together. When you've got extended long notes with rice patterns around it, or like some technical LN bursts with like a lot of physical requirements. This one doesn't quite require that mixture of skill sets, as you mentioned. It's mostly about whether you can do each one in a vacuum, and I think that's going to be a really interesting way to look at it if we do see some tiebreakers in the next weekend.
Yeah, and we see that like there isn't like too much of a break. It kind of just keeps going.
Also, this combo count, holy moly. We're only halfway through and we're already at 5,000.
Yeah, it's gonna be quite a long song here. So, pretty cool storyboard section there, with the jacks coming in. But here we do have a real break, kinda. It's gonna be quite a release.
Yeah, I'm looking at that. You say break, and I see I'm gonna miss here 1,000 times because of the coordination requirement on those long notes.
Technically a break, but not really. I think for the players playing this map, it's not gonna be too tricky.
Hopefully not, but I know now that you've said that, whatever team gets into tiebreaker, someone's going to miss in that section that's going to swing it.
It's the in advance.
Yeah, I was going to say that. You're cursing them a week in advance.
Yeah, we have a big build-up here for the main chorus. Big stream here. Pretty comfortable rolls, so not gonna be too tricky. But big long note section here. This one is quite tricky, I wanna say.
Tricky might be understating it. We've got some kind of brackety LN patterns on top of the fact that some of those transitions between them do have shields in them, which is only going to increase the amount of focus that's required to hold on to them.
Yeah, and then we get into the bit section here at the end where we have this right section with these fast streams mixing in with these long notes here.
Yeah, definitely. One of the most mixed sections that we saw earlier where that quarter stream was kind of merging with the LNs and making it a little bit difficult on both fronts. But we get out of that chorus and get some more long notes similar to what we saw in the intro, which transitioning out of some faster long notes. But that should be coming up to the end of the chart, just under 10,000 combo. Oh, actually, it looks like exactly 9,600. But that's going to finish off our round of 16 tiebreaker and our round of 16 pool.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how teams are going to do that on this, especially some of the harder picks, the EX, see how they're going to be impacting the tournament this round as well.
Yeah, definitely. Having a little bit of a new structure to the map pool is definitely... I've already found it really interesting as a commentator, watching the players kind of determine what is more important in their strategy, whether they want to go for more difficult maps or they want to stick with the pools that are on the normal level of the map pools, but also within their skill sets. It's really interesting, and I think this round of 16 map pool really starts to push that to the limit that I think a lot of players are expecting it to. And I think this starts a really wonderful trend, and I'm really excited to see not only the players play this next weekend, but to see how the map pool develops.
Yeah. With that, that's gonna be all for our round of 16 map pool showcase. Remember, if there's any feedback, anything you want to tell us, map poolers, let us know, and we'll always listen and do stuff. So yeah.
Absolutely. That will be it for the round of 16 map pool. And with the end of the round of 16 map pool, that's going to be it for our round of 32 weekend for the Mania 7 Key World Cup 2026. We've got all of the round of 16 matches up on Challenge. The schedule for the round of 16 matches will be released soon, probably right after this stream ends, if not shortly after. And other than that, I'm really excited for next weekend and hope to see all of you viewers there to see an absolutely incredible weekend of matches where all the stakes are now on the table with 16 of our teams facing elimination. It's going to be a great time. I hope to see you there. We will see you next weekend for the round of 16.
Yeah.
自由違うの全部違うの重ねたところから